Welcome to the Future of the Present podcast. Dr. Michael Benitez, how are you doing today? It's so good to have you on.
Sister, life is blessed. Good to see you, Aisha. Peace and blessings. Breath is blessed. Here we are in 2025, and no, feeling good. Feeling, let's see where life continues to take life. But
Mm,
it's a pleasure to be on. Thanks for having me. It's always good to kick it with you. It's always beautiful to be here and sharing space and place with you.
likewise. I'm so grateful for you, fam. I want to know if you can kind of kick us off with a mini introduction. I mean, I know that we connected many years ago by way of Encore and hip hop. I'm going to call it like hip hop ciphering with the academic flavor and all the other things. But I wonder if you could introduce yourself in your own words to our global audience. Um,
Absolutely, absolutely. People, global audience, brothers and sisters and fans out there. My name is Mike B or Mike Benitez. Uh, I'd go by, Dr. Mike B or just Mike B. I'm good either way. What can I say about myself? I'm from Puerto Rico. Grew up in the tropics, the first since I was about 7. Then ended up in New York City for about 4 or 5 years before making my way to what is called the Lehigh Valley of Pennsylvania, and finished off middle school and then did high school there. I am a cultural worker, community engager, community worker, educator, receiver, lifelong learner, father, partner, husband, brother, uncle, everything that comes with life. I'm also, someone that loves to find a space for cipher, and right, Aisha, you mentioned that by way of hip hop. So a big hip hop head, but also a big just music head overall. Everything that helps bring a sense of joy to life. And I'm a at heart though I'm an educator. I'm in higher education. I'm a vice president for diversity, equity, and inclusion at Metro State University of Denver. I've been here 5 years. I've served many other roles. I'm also a professor in the School of Ed. Uh, and the administrative work keeps me busy, so I haven't been in the classroom. But the university is my classroom. I do quite a bit of work out there, just by invitation, nationally, internationally, globally, with respect of just bringing voice and the kind of humility that comes with being invited to come and share and bring voice and all the learnings that I take from those journeys. So that's just a little bit about just kind of me, who I am, how I show up, how I live life.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I'm so thrilled for people to get to hear and see more of your brilliance, both on this pod, but in this year to come too, because I know you're always cooking up some amazing things, and bringing beautiful people together too to create so much change in the world, which is a wonderful thing. I wonder, I wanted to kick off with this
Yes.
question by way of Grace Lee Boggs, which is what time is it on the clock of the world? What time
Mm,
is it on the clock of the world?
wow. Yes, Grace Lee Buggs. Had the Now, I had the honor to meet Grace in
No.
Iowa by way of my dear friend and professor, Dr. Keisho Scott, who was a mentee of hers. And we had her out at Grinnell College to come, shortly before she transitioned to the ancestors, and going to hang with them. Wow, what time is it right now on the global clock? Mm.
Mhm.
Oh man, when I think about that, I think about it's always the time, right? That's the time on the global clock. It's always the time. like there's so much going on, and so much um, separatist movements, or so much, tensions, and so many different worldviews coming together on a global scale, that trying to figure out how to navigate and negotiate that and make that work, and take some real effort, some real intent, some real understanding, openness, some empathy. But most importantly, it requires a certain intention behind our humanities. And I'm speaking to the humanities of collective preservation, collective thinking. So when I think about what time is it on the global clock, I think about how the time is always now. How it's always a good time to be active, to be involved, to activate, to engage. That's the time that it is on the global clock. It kind of requires of us to be attentive and intentional and present in a way that can be, it can be worrying. It can definitely bear down on shoulders and on body and spirit. And so the time has to account for the outward element of a collective thinking and leaning into how to bring resolute to some of the challenges. But it also is the time to go inward and introspective and take care of yourself. We don't think about that, a lot in the cultural work world, in the community engagement world. What it means, not necessarily to like self-care, like to get out to a beach and chill and kick it. Oh, I'm at the beach self-care. No, like a real inward, introspective a journey of creating boundaries or a certain spiritual armor that
Yeah.
allows you to also remain grounded and calm with who you are, so that you can show up all the time to that global clock in ways that are most impactful and allow you to be most present.
Yes. I mean, this feels very resonant with the title of the podcast, "The Future of the Present," because it's like,
Mm.
what seeds are we planting now? And it's
Yes.
always the time. I hear you 110%. Yes. I'm thinking about so many different folks that I've met on this journey, and how they're not sure how to enter. Like it's always the time, but I'm almost thinking about like jump roping. Like when do you jump in? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes hearing our stories about how we came about this work and what really spurred it, can help people find truth in their own stories, of the truth that's already there, and how they can proceed, take the next best step, as change makers, as activists, as advocates, and so forth. So I wonder if you can share a little bit of your story of how you came about doing this social justice work, both in education and if you want to speak more broadly, because I know you're creating waves. You're creating waves on a lot of different levels. So you
No
can
doubt,
slice it
no
as you
doubt.
will. But
No, delighted to. What's wild, sis, is that like it's taken me a while to get to a place
mm,
where I truly own my story from a place of feeling like I could share it, and sort of the humility that comes with it by way of the come up, but
mm,
also in a way where it doesn't become a spectacle or consumption, especially for dominant Western worlds, to kind of take my story and sit with it and be like, well, if he did it with all those hardships and conditions and adversity, then anyone can, because it just minimizes and takes away from everybody's different struggles and journeys and however they wrestle with their own lives, right? I grew up primarily in Puerto Rico, and so I came from a place of abundance culturally. I was very humble economically, but culturally, I was the richest person in the world, right?
mm,
I always have to delineate between those. And when I say, "Oh man, I came from nothing," it's like, nah. I came from everything. Now, economically, perhaps there wasn't much, but culturally, familial, community. From the mountains of Puerto Rico, I grew up picking half my breakfast from trees half of the time. If it's mango season, it's mangoes, oranges, and bread and butter with coffee, café con leche, as we said, right, in the island. Um, Down in Juana Diaz, Villalba, kind of, area, which is like South Central Puerto Rico. Uh, and then from there, and most of my family's still out there, which is beautiful. I love going back though. Puerto Rico, as we know, it's a complex story on a global scale, and its relationship to settler colonial understandings and the space that it is right now. Then, we moved to New York, migrated, a different type of migration. It comes with citizenship. But yeah, there's all the otherness and the lack of belonging and the trying to figure out a new world. And yet it's interesting because we were in the Heights when we moved. We were uptown, Manhattan on 179. So like everybody's talk Spanish anyway. So, right, it wasn't like a tough transition by way of lingo. It was just a tough transition culturally, expectations, rules, schooling, things like that. But like many, regrettably, like many families, right? My mom and dad had their issues, and eventually some moves were made, and then I ended up in Allentown, Pennsylvania, where from there, me and my sibs, three of them, me, my three siblings, and my mom ended up in a homeless shelter for battered women. And that started, I think, to really expose me to life in a different way, right? I mean, you have one room, one family. I remember wanting a certain type of cereal. I think it was Trix, but it had somebody's name on it. So we had to kind of get our own food. And I just didn't understand, but why can't I have some of that cereal? Just a very different type of understanding. And then I turned of age enough that I guess at that moment, I could no longer, as a young man, stay there because I was the eldest. So then they transfer us to another shelter in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, called New Bethany Ministries. And then we stayed there for, several months until my mom qualified for like Section 8 housing and welfare benefits and the food stamps back in the day when the papers brought colors. If folks out there, aren't aware, that was a food stamp system. It's still in place, but back in the day, they were kind of cool. I don't know what it was about it because there was like papers with different colors. It wasn't just money. It was like the 5 was brown and the 10 was green and the 20, I don't know, whatever that looks like, right? And it gives you a different twist, man, like to understand homelessness from and home insecurity or just home insecurity from that perspective. Growing up in Section 8, growing up with the cheese, growing up having to report to authorities and going with your mom so that they make sure your mom is following rules, all those things started to already shape how I thought, started to shape my thinking around justice, around social justice, around systems, around the haves and have-nots, around entitlement and privileges, around being someone new in new space and new land, and trying to figure out a whole system. Right back in Puerto Rico, like if someone became of age and maybe they decided they're gonna marry, this whole kind of ritual where a lot of the uncles and family members get together and over time build a house. You know what I mean? Right? Very different here, where it's like, oh no, you kind of here you save up to buy a house, and if you poor, that's not gonna go very well. And land is hella expensive. It's not necessarily like it was back in the mountains or in PR where you buy a piece of land and you keep it for a while and you cultivate it and you prep it, for whatever it comes. And then you get to college, which, for me, it was wild because I could speak to so many journeys in between, but I was an athlete and I was a hood cat, but I was also a nerd. I used to love just getting my intellectualism on, or I appreciated it. more after maybe my sophomore, junior year in high school. But I was also engaged in a lot of unfortunate just acts and just run crowds or just growing up in hoods. You find communities in ways that you don't know if they're healthy or unhealthy. So I got in quite a bit of trouble. Was locked up in juvie 3 times before I even made it to my junior year in high school, right? But there was this one moment that changed my life, sis, and this is so important because wow, you think about unexpected impact. I remember the third time I got locked up in juvie and my mom came to pick me up because they were going to release me on good behavior. And she gave me this look outside, like it was like I don't know what else to do with you look.
Mm.
I'm giving up on you look. I have your 3 siblings that I need to also think about. You're the oldest, get your shit together look. And for the first time, I really sat with, oh my God, it's like my mom giving up on me. Not that she wants to, not that she's an asshole. No, like my mom is incredibly, just huge heart, huge. The biggest lessons I learned a lot in life were from her patience, forgiveness, right? Things like that.
Yes.
Um, but she was letting me go from a place of like, bro, it's a lot, and she didn't drive, so she had to hop on 2, 3 buses to get to where she needed to get to where I was at, right? Or
Yeah.
the amount of times I got picked up and she had to cross across the bridge to go get me to the police station. And it just hit me. It dawned on me. I was like, oh my God, man, I just can't. Wow, man. And it started to hit me, man. This is life. This is life for, kids, for youth who don't grow up with role models, who grow up in under-resourced communities, who don't grow up with vision, who are always kind of directed in ways that say you're only going to be good enough for the workforce, for labor. Creativity is not part of the conversation. Innovation is not part of the conversation. On occasion, you hear the word potential,
Mhm.
and for somebody that doesn't know potential, man, you kind of like what? What you talk about, man? Where that at? Um, and and then I got an opportunity through Upward Bound and what is EOE programs, equal opportunity programs in college to go to Penn State. And that changed a lot about my life. It changed a lot about how I understood anger, especially growing up, in many ways, like upset, raged, right, enraged at the kind of life, right, that I've been given. No pops at the time, or at least absence of. Not that my pops not alive, just absence of. Growing
Mm.
up with my mom, growing up with my auntie and my cousin, who both are, have severe mental health challenges, diagnosed mental health challenges, with my sibs, and working very young, since I probably worked since I was 12.
Whew.
Right. So when you work since you're 12 and that's what man, it becomes part of your life ethics, right? Like
Yeah.
the what you put in is what you get out. And it becomes a big part of who you are. A lot of that contributed to me and who I am today, even going through college and then the journey thereafter, because I thought in such intersectional ways from the get-go. I just
Mm.
didn't have the word. I didn't have the vocab, the lexicon to say, oh, this is intersectional, right? It was just, and to be fair, right, I also had some unlearning to do, right? Kind of, you grow up in those environments, you grow up with a little bit of an unhealthy masculine tendency, toxic or masculinity around, this is how I defend myself. And if you step up to me, this is how, and you have to, oh my God, unlearn so much about just, uh, growing up in conditions that teach you to survive, very like the rest of the earth type shit, than to grow up in conditions that saturate and cultivate within you a sense of a healthy come up and a growth and nurturing your spirit. Uh, so right off the dome, I understood issues like poverty, like class, like who gets it and who doesn't. I was fortunate enough to have also peers who identify within the GLBQ plus and the transgender communities very young. So I also understood, I didn't fully understood then, but I understood there's a challenge there. they're not quite accepted like the norm, right? I understood also that you got treated differently because you have an accent or because you're brown or black or you weren't the standard, at least here in the context of the US, right? The prototype sort of white male. Um, and I saw the differences. I saw from the get-go again how teachers gave a lot of white students benefit of the doubt unless the students show otherwise. But for a lot of black and brown young men, it was like almost automatically, that's the zip code, that's where they're from, this is what they're going to present with. All right. So you already kind of show up with like a -5, trying to make it. And for me, education became my way. When I got to college, I remember I was so angry because I was just angry. I was angry at growing up, and surely but little started to understand what it means to walk without anger, or to not be angry, or to not blame others, or to understand systems, but also assume agency for how you move through life and with life and what's important to you. And I got engaged in a bunch of different, well, a lot of people do, right? Like 10 million organizations at the detriment of your academic performance. Overly involved, right? In the leadership, from Puerto Rican Student Association to Black Caucus to NAACP to MECHA to being a charter founder of a fraternity, because there weren't other fraternities that spoke to a particular type of interest with respect to some values around organizations, to my master's in education, wanting to help or to reach back out to my communities and hope that I could touch students in the same way that some influential people in my life touched me, who either gave so I could get through college or were an ear so I can make it out or get through some days. I mean, right? Like the thing about mentoring is that most mentors will never ever get to meet their mentees. And so when you do have a mentor in front of you who is in the physical and you have that real relationship, you're not just learning from them, but you're there present, relating with one another. It's truly a spectacular and magnificent thing. And then over the years, sis, right, that just kind of like incited deeper care, right?
Yeah.
Deeper care for people, deeper care for humanity, deeper care for fairness, deeper care for equity and equality, deeper care for justice, deeper care for just doing my part in contributing to a better humanity. And then you sit with the conundrum, right? The tension that is education. Here is the space that from day one is the worst space our students get into because it's a settler colonial state. The way they teach history and social studies and geography, the way they privilege and prioritize knowledge, certain knowledges versus other knowledges, right? It's real. And yet, it is the one space that offers the greatest opportunity for most, not all, for most, for upward mobility, for economic mobility, for self-sustainability. I think when you look back, I do wish that if there's 3 or 4 classes I think schools should be teaching is financial literacy. They should keep home economics, shit like how to sew something together when it rips, things that keep you honest. Agricultural sustainability, I think kids need to start from very young, just understanding soil and earth and how to plant and how to cultivate, just things like growing tomatoes and peppers, right? Right, again, right? And then lastly, like a combination of something that allows you to work with like wood, just something that allows you to work with nature or to work with natural resources, or where you understand what it means to build something and contribute something beyond the intellectual, which I love too, right? Obviously, I'm a higher ed, Ph.D., but we can only theorize so much, man. At the end, the world is the world. And if we can't truly understand understand how to take theory and turn it into practice, or how to throw theory away when theory needs to be thrown away, and focus on the practice of a moment, and the resolution or resolve we need to find for something that is necessary at the time, then what does all that mean anyway, right? And who's that really for? And so that's a little bit, there's so much more there, but that's just a little bit about my journey. And I would say my greatest influencer, but in the most of unintended ways, was my mom. Because even though maybe she didn't do it in the healthiest ways, the lessons that you learn around patience and restraint and forgiveness, right? These are all so vital to flowing through life with a liberatory spirit, or at least trying your best to. All right, these are words that I don't think we give enough weight to. Right? You think about someone like Bruce Lee, who talked about just restraint all the time, right? In his philosophies. And you don't learn how valuable, when you do social justice work, especially, the idea and practice of something like restraint means and looks like in so many different ways, or even patience, right? So that's a bit into the journey of becoming a social justice oriented educator who just has a deep love for humanity. I could sit with someone all the way on the left and take them in. I could sit with someone all the way on the right and adjacently take them in, meaning I'll take them in because I'm a human being and I believe in civility. But right, the moment that people start to sound like they're okay with your demise, right? The moment they start to sound like they're okay if you're gone tomorrow, it's not that you can't listen or engage in the conversation, but you don't know if you want to entertain that conversation much longer,
Mm,
right?
yes.
And then everything in between.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. There's so much deep care that is part
Yeah.
and parcel to
Yes.
the
So
work.
for me, the love is everything. I think love is the number one ingredient. It informs the care. It informs how you think about spaces. It informs how you choose to not engage with some spaces. It informs how you choose to engage with a lot of spaces, right? Because we can't always do all the work, but what are the appropriate spaces of education and social justice work, and how do those so show up?
Yes. Well, so this is a perfect kind of transition to you started to touch on this a little bit, but what are some of the major challenges in our educational systems? Currently, we're on the precipice. It's in January 2025. There are a lot of things happening in the world. January 6th of that, like just reflecting on this day in and of itself, what do
Hmm.
you view as some of the largest challenges that we have in the educational space? And if you want to touch on, you already put a lot of medicine into what you said, but if you want to touch on some of the medicine to what is needed to address these intersectional challenges that we have, what does that liberation start to look like? What maybe even inviting us to dream up with some questions. Um, I'm curious your perspective on that, the challenges and maybe where we need to start looking to make a difference.
And that's a great question, sis. I think there's multiple challenges, and I think that they're
Mhm.
layered, and some are systems, but some also sit at the micro level, right? And I think for me, and I always talk about this, and it's a difficult conversation, especially in the world of education, is epistemic supremacy. It's largely in the context of the U.S., a largely kind of white male heterosexual, and I could add all the able-bodied, right? Is this sort of what's the ultimate prototype of descendants, but from a place of power and control and putting in place systems. And I say, epistemic challenges because right off the dome in education, we're truly not teaching, I believe, starting from first grade or even kindergarten, in ways that allow students to see themselves reflected completely and entirely in what they're learning, right? And I get it. There's a lot out there, but if we're truly going to claim to be a diverse nation, if we're truly going to claim to be right, this sort of nation of immigrants, which is problematic in itself from a place of native territories and sovereignty and lands, and much of the nations that were already and still are present in this land. It's so important to mention that sometimes we treat the conversation of native culture like it was a past thing, or like it's some spectacle, right? But no, man, right? Like native nations are not only still around, they were around way before Westernization even existed here in this, right, Turtle Island, or what we call the U.S. and the Americas.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that for me, that's the biggest challenge, because that's where students start to become indoctrinated already. That's already where they start to see themselves as not the norm, especially for a lot of kids, a lot of youth who are not that traditional norm prototype. They start to see themselves in proximity to or distance from, or how far they deviate from what is that norm, that expectation. And then they start to use that at the center, as the center of who they want to be or are, or how they start envisioning who they can be. And if there's no mix up in there, if there's no diversity, if there's no real showing a sense of reflection for them, to see themselves in those spaces, either in representation or in content or in learning, then right off the dome, that creates such a crisis, such a spiritual and identity crisis. And it's bad right from the get-go, right? So to me, that's the biggest challenge. Is that the other is the way we think about education, the way about we think about what's important or not important. I kind of alluded to it earlier by way of, oh man, where's our sense of self-sustainability? Where's our sense of agency? Where's our sense of being able to do things for ourselves? And what are we learning, and how are we learning to some degree just become workhorses? And that depends on who, right? Because generational wealth matters, and we all know there's plenty of studies out there. So not to get into studies and literature and research, but that kind of right show that if parents have degrees, they're more likely to encourage their kids than to have degrees. And then on the flip side, parents without degrees who may encourage but don't have the resources, don't have the tools, don't really know what that means. Uh, and so it's so important to have the type of programs that open up those doors of access for a variety of students and youth to build that interest. But we also sleep on what constitutes knowledge. Back to your question of medicine, I always, we learn early to not share stories, to not bring up as that's something subjective, right? That's not positivist, it's not neutral. And it's like there's no real thing as neutrality in a world of multi-direction.
Mm.
There's no such thing as neutrality. We're always going to be either choosing or showing up with our own experiences, informing how we show up. So when we forget to tell our stories and share our stories, similar to like the way nations, right, indigenous cultures, or native nations past tradition, what we're doing is we are eliminating and or eradicating, to some sense, part of our own medicine, part of the way we heal, part of the way that we learn how to bring resolve to some of the challenges themselves. And we're here trying to figure out what in the toolkit, and yet so much of the toolkit is within us.
Mm. Mhm.
Right. So those are the pieces, especially around the liberatory spirit. We fail and we don't learn How do we show up with grace and pace? How do moments dictate things like grace and pace? How do we not allow systems, even as we have to navigate and negotiate them, hijack our joy, our happy, our spirit, our ability to also live? Because, we are in a world and systems are systems. Sidewalks are systems. Structures are systems. Schools are systems, no different than the legal system is a system. And politics is a system. And we exist in this vacuum of systems. And so they're not going nowhere. So how do we live
Mm.
our best life, but how do we also contribute in the best ways? And how can education serve as a vehicle to be able to show our students not only, hey, here's what you need to know because systems need you to know this, but here's what you need to know so that you can better navigate and negotiate life and systems in themselves, so that as you think about what you want to do and how you want to have an impact or how you want to make money, whatever it is, that you still do it in a way that's accountable to your relationship to humanity.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. Still do it in a way that's accountable to your relationship to humanity. Yes, 110%. Part of
And we could get into the challenges around who has the resources and who doesn't have the resources. We know those exist. We know zip codes matter. We know that the ghettoization of communities over years and how that has changed, at least in the context of the U.S. here and in other parts of the world that looks very different, right? You have some nation states with built-in caste systems. You have other nation states that have certain regulations and policies that create their own disparities and those part of the world. And then the U.S. has its own right set of challenges around how those disparities and disparate impact continue to be sustained over generations. And that to me is probably the biggest challenge outside of epistemic, because it's the way that systems sustain systems, and it's the way that we become tethered in ways that don't allow us to have our own come up or to see ourselves as our own creators and innovators and shapers and dictators of our lives.
What's coming to mind as you say this is I think I was listening back to some of your amazing keynotes online, which I recommend for everyone to listen into, in addition to coming to hear and connect with you in person, hopefully on the road. Um, but you said, don't belong, reclaim, or don't strive to just belong, reclaim.
Yes.
Claim. And I was wondering if you could unpack that for us.
Absolutely. Thanks for bringing that up. That's such a big part of who I am and how I show up.
Mm.
Um, I think that systems are created in ways that try to seek for an answer externally, right? Like here we are in schools, here we are in society and the different elements of society, and we paint a picture around what does it mean to belong to space or find belonging in space, and yet the values that guide and the behaviors and practices that guide those spaces so often don't truly represent or resemble like everyone's values in the same way. And so I appreciate that a lot of institutions and organizations make an effort to figure out how do we make sure that we're cultivating a space of belonging for everyone, right? But cultivating a space of belonging for everyone truly means cultivating a space of belonging for everyone. So we have to look at everything with a sense of unity and collectivism, but also with a sense of individuality around how we're attentive to particular needs, particular values and beliefs, and the way that people show up. And so I started to really speak to not showing up to belong, because I feel like that sometimes sets us up not necessarily for a failure, but for an unnecessary challenge, right? Like if I was to go to a 4-year institution that I know was founded under these values by these people for this purpose, and it has almost nothing to do with me culturally, right? It's just a strictly a bit of an economic kind of journey to get to a better place by way of those means, or getting the knowledge I need to go perform somewhere else. I'm not really focusing on self. And not only that, I'm already showing up somehow thinking I don't belong in this part of humanity. So when I use the word now reclaim, I don't show up to belong. I show up to reclaim. But I also show up with that as a very authentic part of my spirit. It's not like this intentional, fuck belonging. I'm about reclaiming. No, it's a real, I already belong to humanity. I already belong to this space. This is already my space. This is already my humanity. So I'm showing up to reclaim what I believe has always already been mine. And
Hmm.
so when I work with students or just different communities, I always try to show up with a spirit of trying to create that shared space for that type of deeper thinking around, well, let's not show up to belong in space. Let's show up to reclaim space that is already ours. How do we fit into that? And with that comes navigating and negotiating in ways where you don't set yourself up for the disappointment of a dominant system and structure that has very little to do with how you show up, with your spirit, with your heart, with your ethos, with what you value. But in any space, you could find those micro spaces, right, of belonging, but that comes with a reclaiming. That doesn't come with a showing up to belong. That comes with a showing up, understanding you belong, and now you need to claim or reclaim that which is already yours.
Yes.
And that's liberatory thinking, right? That's liberatory praxis. That's uh, truly showing up with a sense of that's already a space for me. It's just that I'm not there yet, but you're going to see me soon. And when you see me, just know that I'm going to be there, and I'm going to be in your grill, but I'm going to be in your grill with love, and with absolute radical love. And I'm going to be there also with a sense of liberation. I'm not going to let you dictate, right, and hijack or determine what my spirit can look like. And it doesn't mean that I'm not playing with systems. No, man, we got to play with systems all the time. It just means that I'm going to do me within this space because this space has room for me already.
Yes. Yes. I understand. I What you're saying is so powerful. Um, and I want to take one more step forward
Yeah.
into this conversation about liberation, because I think sometimes when we're doing this work, this liberatory work of reclaiming, we can still feel very alone. And part of the systems that we're in drive us to a feeling of individualism and or loneliness and isolation, the divide and conquer. There are so many different ways to name it. Um, and then we forget the power of our collective of coming together. And so I'm curious, how do you see us best facing that challenge and remembering how much we need each other? You can get as granular or as you want. You can tell a story around it, but I think that's a piece that feels like it's often missing in our praxis and how we find each other. And it's awkward too because we have to practice it, and it might not be perfect. And yet, if you're holding out your hand and someone's like, "I don't what I don't know
Yeah,
how to
yeah,
join
yeah,
hands in this,"
absolutely.
So if you can speak to that, how do we find each other in this collective praxis that you're talking about?
Yeah, the thing about social justice work or just kind of justice and equity work writ large, especially as it relates to social identities, right? Is that doing this work in a world or in a sea where everyone maybe doesn't have that third eye or everyone doesn't have that deeper criticality, right? It can be hard. It could be lonely. Yeah. Oh, it could get very, very lonely because sometimes you feel like you're the only one that cares, or you're the only one that's trying, or you're the one that wants to make an impact. And then there's so few people, right, that truly kind of give their time and energy and effort in such a way as to think and act bigger than themselves. And the way to do that is to just, at least for me, what has worked is as I've built communities over the years, different communities, you're part of that community, right? Um, you really lean into expanding, redefining, and reinventing what community looks like for you, Right. So it doesn't have to be immediately in front of you. Man,
Mm,
it could just, but before it was a phone call away. Now we could, get up on social media and video and virtual and shit, man. Holograms are next. But also say, also say that we could find that more readily now. And that has its own challenges because, right, that's very different from having it immediately in front of you. Um, but we have to expand our version of community and what that looks like. It's almost like when people say, blood is thicker than water, and not. Sometimes water is thicker than blood.
mm,
It's not to take away kin. It's not to, go back to what are cliche statements or comments. It's simply to say that you get to define and determine and cultivate what your community looks like,
yeah,
and you get to decide what is your family and who and to what end and for what purpose, and who do you lean on in different ways. And you know what? And sometimes it's also okay to go inward and introvert and sit with yourself and find a sense of community within your spirit, right? And so that's what I mean by reinvention.
mm,
The idea of finding community, are tied to purpose. It's tied to you and who you are. Perhaps tied to I don't know, change and transformation that you want to be a part of and contribute to. But we have to think both about the self, and then we also have to think about, right, like you can do self-preservation without doing collective preservation. And you can do collective preservation, absolutely not, without doing self-preservation. And when you look at it from a radical, right, just getting to the root of what it is you're finding in purpose, or the meaning you're making out of uh, your interests, or how you're finding your way around life, and you start to see that uh, we don't have to look for folks or find folks in community that are exactly like us, or that think exactly the same way, or like, oh man, like the more diverse even that thinking is, the more it also just opens up different understandings and opportunities for ongoing reinvention. But it's like a healthy reinvention. It's like a healthy ongoing transformation that allows you to evolve with yourself. It allows you to evolve with life. And it allows you to also kind of trust in life and trust in humanity, in ways that require your authenticity, coupled with intentions, with the hopeful formula of a solid outcome.
yes. Hmm. This is so powerful. I want to be mindful. I got two more questions left.
Please, no,
And
I'm good. I'm here with you, sis.
cool.
Loving the
I want to try to, because you're dropping so much knowledge too. So I'm like, I want to make sure to be respectful of your time, and also to, yeah, to respect the abundance that you're pouring onto this podcast right now. Um, what's coming to mind, I actually had my next question was about, we connected through hip hop in part, and you're a poet as well, you're an artist. I wanted to ask about the role of art in this. But as I even started to think about asking that question, something came up in me that was like also about spirituality. And is there a spiritual, and or for me, those things are connected, creative, artistic element to what you're speaking about? Do those elements, whether that's a spiritual element and or creative element, or if we view those things as connected, have a role in your everyday activism, so to speak? If so, can you speak to that?
Absolutely. No, that's a great question. And um, this goes back to systems, and let me just kind of, I want to anchor it there because I love the question you bring up, and it's always one that comes up. What role do arts or creativity, have in this journey, or especially as part of life? It's like you don't have to be an artist to practice art. You don't have to be a full-time poet to practice poetry or music, any of that, right? It does. I believe it does. I don't think you can untether those. I think that there's a role in art in different ways as a way of healing and as a way of finding a space or an outlet for you to recreate. You know, in my case, when I first started writing spoken word or poetry at the time, right? And this is like when spoken word was like becoming this big thing in the late 90s, early 2000. It was beginning to be regrettably commoditized, but it was also good for society to see it, right? Because you got to kind of go back into the 70s, into, you know, Gil Scott and, you know, right? Last poets
Yeah.
who carved sort of that road to hip hop. And right. You know, I started writing it, poetry, just as a reflective way to deal with hardship or when I have hard times, or to put something in paper that if I said it out loud, people would not understand.
Yeah.
Right. You know, and then later, like in 2000, I think maybe 6 or 7, 6 was the first time that I finally said, oh, let me actually take some of my poetry that I've been writing and speak it and put it out there as part of a programming effort or as part of a workshop or as a different way to engage youth. That, you know, I did some work, some volunteering at the juvenile detention center that I got locked up in when I went back to the Lehigh Valley. I was like, I don't want to say a writer in residence, but like I went and was like, hey, can this youth use some mentoring? I remember being here, and they said yes, and so I would go and teach creative writing to this youth who are there in a juvenile center, right? Just little workshops on how to be creative with writing, how to put your feelings onto paper, how to put your thoughts onto paper, how to be okay with the process of writing not being this linear process.
Mm-hmm.
And that was so big because we teach writing like it's a linear process. And we fail to teach it from a creative standpoint unless it's creative literature, right? Only in that class can you be creative, you know? And, you know, and yet, you know, hip hop and hip hop legends have, man, they're some of the purest, rawest, most talented poets the world will ever get to hear and know and see across the world from all different nations. We've seen the power of hip hop. So there is a place, and for me, you can untie them because there is an element of creativity. Whether you're a positivist creator like architecture,
Mm-hmm.
that's creativity right there. That's artistry, man.
Mm-hmm.
People sleep, right? Like, and granted, with that, you really got to know your physics, and you really got to know, you know, how things kind of come together. And then there's, you know, something like music, right? Putting sounds together,
Yep.
production. And then you look at just
Yep.
art. When people get creative with even fine arts and the way they get real playful and allow sort of this expression and part of themselves to truly be part of themselves.
Yeah.
So there is, I think not all art is spiritual, but I do believe that quite a bit of art has a spiritual element to it. And to be frank with you, I believe that, for me at least, that in its foundation, art is informed to some degree to a spiritual energy that kind of calls you to that type of expression, whatever that form of expression looks like.
Yeah. Ooh. To round us off, um, I want to ask you a question about legacy
Mm,
because, yeah, I mean, this is essentially kind of at the heart of the podcast. What legacies are we building? And you're welcome to, of course, talk about this through your personal lens, but also you keep bringing it back to the systems. And I really appreciate that grounding because we are in the context of these systems. We're also creating, hopefully, more liberatory systems.
right.
But I'm curious what legacy, whether it's a legacy that you um, want your legacy, what does that look like, and or the legacy that of all the institutions, all the communities that you've touched and been part of? If you want to answer it from a collective standpoint, but what do those legacies look like? What's your most liberated vision of it? I want to anchor it too with a quote. I was thinking about Fred Hampton, when he says,
Mm,
"We don't fight fire with fire." To paraphrase
hmm
him, we fight fire with water. We don't fight racism with racism. We fight racism with solidarity. I think about you a lot when I think about the power of knowing our intersectionality, knowing that we need to work together, and um, that our family, our global family, can do so much together when we understand that solidarity in practice. Um, the theory is one layer, but bringing that into practice, and I see you as someone who is doing that practice regularly. Um, so as a humble starting point, that's part of what I see in the legacy and legacies that you are building and collectively building. But I would love to hear you speak more about, yeah, your legacy, our legacy.
Yeah, no, that's a great one. It's one that I reflected on more as of recent. It's also one of those questions that that you struggle with a little bit. At least I do,
Mm,
because I have to ask, right? What legacy? Like there is a point in legacy. Like there's a meaning there. There's something deeper than just legacy, right? Around legacy. But and I'm glad you brought up systems. I sometimes I think that so many people allow ego to inform legacy,
yeah.
and then for someone like me, it kind of pushes me away from at times the question like, what legacy, right? Do we want to leave behind? And when I think about legacy, I'm going to now offer up a quote from a dear sister that many folks may know, Erica Alexander, who said, the painful is the past is painful, the present is precarious, but the future is always free. And I love that because it reminds one that legacies are complex. Legacies also have different tones to them. They have different elements depending on, right, the sort of the temporal aspects of legacy. What a legacy today might look like moving forward is very different from the legacy that was left by our ancestors, generation after generation by way of what's the next. So when I think about legacy, sis, I think about how can I contribute to a collective effort, a community effort, a big project, small project, in ways that allow that work to be ongoing and sustainable and that people can build on
Mm,
that people could build on, especially I think about trees. I think about branches and how long it takes them to grow. I think about seasons, and I see seasons as sort of a necessary evolution for legacy, right? Like, how do you let the leaves fall so new leaves come in that are now ready to take on whatever's the new environment, right? And so when I think about legacy, I think about it in that generational way, whether it's seven generations back, seven generations forward. I also think about it in ways that say, how am I living a footprint that is not necessarily a my footprint? It's just a footprint that allows the next generation to pick up from where things left off, hopefully better, and then they can take that with them and then continue to take the work wherever the work needs to go next.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But those legacies and systems are important, and that's how even when you think about like this space education, right? This created a certain way, and then the civil rights brought this element of diversity, difference, and equality into the mix and inclusion. We're living this legacy,
Yeah.
right? We're living this legacy and we're reshaping it and now needing to evolve it to look a little different for what the future is, right? It started out with minority affairs, all right? And then it became multicultural affairs. And then it became intercultural affairs. And now it's DEI. You see, right? Right. And those are legacies building upon legacies, building upon legacies. And I hope that legacies, when we think about legacy, that we get to places where we no longer require the vocabulary and lexicon to demarcate legacy in such a way that it needs to somehow be put out there as if to want to grab attention, but that it is just done, acted upon, and practiced seamlessly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even if the lexicon wasn't there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because lexicon is beautiful way to mark legacy, but in the wrong systems is also a way that legacies can be commoditized, culturally hijacked, and bastardized.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I will take the praxis of legacy, the action of legacy and how it shows up over its demarcation any day.
Yes. Mm-hmm. 110%. Mm-hmm. And that praxis is, I'm thinking about bell hooks and love as being a verb, as it being an action. And I see that in the way you move in the world.
Gratitude, that means a lot.
In so many spaces. And I love um, that interrogation of the way that the term legacy is often used with is a loving interrogation, and it also brings into center that forest that we're building, or that ecosystem that we're building, to build on your metaphor with trees, right? Yeah. That is so powerful. Thank you for sharing this time with us. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. Thank you for sharing so abundantly. I know that there's so much nutrients in what you just shared for the liberation work that many people are doing and or are about to find themselves doing after listening to this. And I'm just so grateful. Is there anything else that you wanted to share for our listeners to keep tabs on, to keep in mind? You've shared more than enough, so there's no pressure at all. But if there's anything, closing remarks you want to share, you're more than welcome.
Yeah, no, thank you. I want to share one thing, sis, because I think it's important to this theme around past, futures, right, present, around much of what we were in conversation about today. And that is that as we take on journeys and as we figure out how we can best contribute, influence or impact, be part of what some righteous and transformation for humanity looks like, that we truly own the praxis of agency. I think that there's at times a lot of times we lean on what external what is externally defined as, again, I'm gonna go back to that toolkit. And I think that we need to be at a place perhaps now where we can really truly own the power of agency and advocacy, and in this beautiful work, especially to find this space and place of absolute and unequivocal liberation. The agency for me becomes probably the most important piece that allows us to drive the collective thinking and moving. If we don't understand that piece first, that means regrettably that we are relying too often on that which is not the agency, right, of who we are to be the voice that drives movement, that drives flow. So I share that because I think that to me, as it most recently has become such a big part of how I'm rethinking and reinventing even community activist and advocacy work through the agency of show. It doesn't mean that once you speak, the world's going to change right thereafter. No, it means that you're allowing your authenticity to show up to space respectfully. Don't be an asshole about it. Respectfully, in ways where you feel good about what you put out there, but that also and most importantly feel good about the way you honored yourself, so that you can be best available or present whether you're there or not.
Mm. Knowing our power and our collective power.
Yeah,
Just so
yeah.
yes.
That agency, without us recognizing and understanding how instrumental that agency is, it could be real challenging to find that collective power.
100%. Ooh. Okay, y'all. Y'all heard it. We got some calls to action. We got some nutrition. We got some wisdom. And I hope that this is ciphered back to you with many good returns. Although I know you don't do the work for that, but we all need to cipher the good vibes that we have. And you're offering so much love in action to the world. So thank you. Thank you again for joining us today on the pod. What a joy to have you. I hope that we get to see you again sooner than later. And I just want to say thank you. I look forward to sharing this conversation with the world.
Just deepest gratitude. Appreciate you too. A pleasure being here, kicking it with you, just doing what we would normally do over some coffee or something, right? As we're
Yeah.
trying to figure out how to save the world. And through music, through poetry, through education, through community building. Now, thank you immensely for this opportunity. Just being in a beautiful conversation around radical liberation and love that is so necessary. I truly appreciate you and all the work that you do. Let me, for the audience out there, Aisha is a bad sister. I mean, she is just a beautiful spirit, and her work impacts and influences lives in the most profound of ways. So thank you for the work that you do and for the way you put your love out there too.
Mm, it's my pleasure. It's a joy. And it's always a joy to be in community, building that work together.
Indeed.
Arigato. Merci. Gracias, Shesheni. Tusen tak.